It's the fight in a premises liability case is putting the pieces together. You have to get the video surveillance that shows that piece of ice was on the floor for 2 hours. Getting the report that shows that that hole has been there for months. We have to get the story from the person about what happened. You have to piece together the time frame. There was some breach. You don't get a second bite at the apple. You get the one chance to take the deposition. So you're left trying to piece together what you can find. Premises litigation is interesting because what you get to do with that is you get to take a look at the case as a whole, and you have to really put the pieces together. Unlike other areas of law, you have to prove that these people had knowledge of this dangerous condition, so it's not as easy as, per se, maybe an auto case. So I really enjoy having to piece all those together and get the final product. My name is Mary Kate. I'm a PI litigation attorney at Morgan & Morgan, and I'm here to talk about premises liability with you today. So premises liability is when someone does something wrong within a premise. So, for example, you're at a store or you're at a facility owned by someone else. That person has a duty to keep that facility or that building in a reasonably safe condition. And when they fail to do so, you end up with a premises liability case. So if you fall when you're in premises liability, or if you slip on something, or other cases less common, dog bites, injuries in terms of violence within a facility, those all fall under premises liability. But what it boils down to is that a building owner or a business owner has a duty to keep that place in a reasonably safe condition. And if you are injured because they don't keep it in a reasonably safe condition, you have a premises liability case. Slip and fall definitely does get a bad rap. I think it's mostly because everyone slip and falls. We all have slip and falls where we've maybe fallen, gotten back up, and we're okay. And that certainly happens. People do get up and they are okay after a slip and fall, but there's times that they're not. I can think of a case I have now where my client's had 4 surgeries because she slipped and fell and she hurt herself. And it's those cases that need to change, and the perception of slip and fall cases. And I think at Morgan, that's what we do. And having that opportunity to litigate a case allows us to help change the perception. We're not just settling for, $1,000, $5,000, some nuisance value because it's a slip and fall and everybody slips and falls. We're fighting for that client. We're fighting till the end because sure, people do slip and fall, but some people really get hurt from it. So one of the biggest things that's the most difficult part of premises liability is you have to establish that this person had a duty and they failed to do that, complete that duty. There was some breach. And in that breach, it's typically the slip, the fall. They didn't repair the hole. They didn't get rid of the puddle. And that's where it's hard. That's the fight in a premises liability case, is putting the pieces together, getting the video surveillance that shows that piece of ice was on the floor for 2 hours, or getting the report that shows that that hole has been there for months and people have been complaining about it. And it's very different from auto in the regard that auto, you're just dealing with 2 cars that collide. Not that it's a very minimal thing, but you're not having to prove that someone did something wrong to the extent you are in a premises liability case. It's much more difficult because often that video doesn't exist or that report magically disappears. So you're left trying to piece together what you can find in order to establish that there was a breach, there was a duty, and it was not followed through with. So with slip and fall cases, we certainly have to look first to see if the person is injured, because like I said, sometimes people slip and fall and they're okay. But if they are injured and they're getting the treatment, the next thing we have to look at is to see if there actually was negligence on behalf of the building, the store, wherever the person injured themselves. So what we have to do is, in premises liability, you have to show, like I said, that there's a breach of the duty. That's where the fight lays a lot of the times in a premise case. So we have to get the video surveillance, or we have to get the story from the person about what happened. If the banana peel dropped on the ground, that person watched it fall and they fell, we probably can't show a breach, because one of the ways that we do that is in time. So showing that something was on the floor for an unreasonable amount of time and the store should have known about it, that's the way we can show that there was negligence on their behalf. Getting a video footage of 4 store employees walking past the puddle shows negligence, because a reasonable person would have corrected that. They would have put a wet floor sign up. They would have picked the object up. They would have done something. In order to help build a successful slip and fall case, some of the evidence that you need is, if it's available, the surveillance footage. That's, I always say, the best evidence you can get in a slip and fall or a trip and fall. Depositions of key employees or key members at the business, because they'll provide you different types of procedures that are in place, standard guidelines that are in place, that'll help you show the breaches that occurred or the standard that is set by that company. And then they didn't follow through with that standard. So if potentially there was a hole in the ground or the hole in a flooring, work orders that had been placed in order to get that place fixed. And how long had they been there? Was the work order just put in? Was the work order put in 6 months ago and no one's done anything about it? Those are some really important pieces of evidence that you need to piece together to make your puzzle. More businesses have cameras. It's easy to go on Amazon and buy a camera for $20. So even small businesses can now put up cameras in their facility. So that's definitely changed the game for us, because we have more access to getting that footage. It's easier to save the footage, for sure. Years ago, it was videotapes. Who knows where the videotape went? Now it's an app on your phone. It's an app on your phone that saves forever. So that definitely changes the game, the use of our technology, how technology is very easily accessible to everybody. Definitely a game changer for us. In terms of negligent security, which is another option that people have for a premises liability case, there's certainly, whatever way you look at it, rise in crime. So there's different policies and procedures that businesses are now having to put in place, which kind of opens the door for a negligent security case, which falls under the umbrella of premises liability. So those are some factors that would definitely change the game for premises liability. So some of the factors that you consider when valuing a premises case is certainly your client's injury. So the injury that they sustained, the treatment that they've received, the medical bills that they've accrued. You also want to look at their future medical expenses. So you want to look at how much they're going to need in the future. If they're going to need another surgery in the future, that's a significant amount of money. But sometimes premises cases can settle for a smaller amount of money pretty quickly, because that's just the facts that run the case, that the client has a smaller amount of damages. They were fortunate enough not to need a surgery or need some major type of treatment. And those, you can settle those, between $5,000, $15,000. But some of them need to be litigated. I have a case right now. Our client has nearly $300,000 in medical bills because she's had to have 4 surgeries because she was injured. And that's a case that we're going to go to trial on. That's a case that we're going to have to see through to the end, because of the way that her treatment has been and her futures are generating. So there's a wide variety in terms of valuing a premises case, but it's predominantly run by the treatment and their injuries, and then the negligence of the party. So premises liability cases, your verdicts and your settlements can come at all different amounts. I've seen a premises liability where water has fallen on a client and they were injured in that regard, and it was a premises case, and we were able to recover a couple $1 million for them. I believe it was $1.6 million for them. I've had other premises liability cases where someone has tripped and fallen over something, and the person was fortunate, and so they weren't as injured, and we were still able to recover, I believe it was $205,000 for them. So there's a large variance in terms of what you can recover, what a verdict will be for a premises liability case. Certainly I've had premises liability cases where they resolve for $10,000, $15,000 because it's early and it's easier and there's not as much of an injury, thank God. It's not like an auto case where if someone was hit, they were injured. It's a little bit more clear cut. In terms of a premises case, it's that breach issue. It's showing that they knew about this or they should have known about the condition and they didn't fix it. And it's really easy for an insurance company or a defense to say, well, we never knew, and then not turn the video over to us. And the way we get the video is filing a lawsuit and going through litigation. So I think that's one of the biggest reasons that cases don't settle in pre-suit in terms of a premises case, is because you really have to fight for everything, and the defenses available to a defense counsel are much larger than in an auto case. When you're approaching a deposition in a slip and fall case or a trip and fall case, it's important that you're looking at exactly who you're deposing. If you're deposing the store manager, you're going to want to make sure you have all the discovery back on that case and you can see the checklists or you can see the guidelines that are in place, so that when you take the deposition, you can ask the party, well, you guys have a standard guideline of if there's a wet spot on the floor, there needs to be a sign up. And then you can show the video footage of, here's the video footage of 4 of your employees walking by and nothing being done. Would that be a violation of your standards, of your guidelines? So knowing the standard procedures of the facility, having the video surveillance footage, because then you can tell them and you can kind of beat them to the punch, because they can't lie to you. They can't say, well, we never knew about it. You can say, well, I had this, or having the work order that shows you were the one that signed off on this getting done 4 months ago. Why didn't you do anything about it? So that stuff is incredibly important when you're going into a trip and fall case. You can't just go into those kinds of depositions blind. If you're flying blind, you're more likely going to miss something, and then you don't get a second bite at the apple. You get the one chance to take the deposition. Once you get to know a company, you know what they're going to work with. You know the defenses they're going to raise. You know the money they're going to put on the table. You know what they're going to throw at you in terms of their case. So working with, Publix frequently, or Walmart, or even Walt Disney World here in Florida, you know that those cases, the defense attorney you're going to get, what they're going to say. And being able to know what the defense attorney is going to say before they say it puts you in a fantastic position, because then you can tell your client, hey, you're going to have a deposition. They're going to do this. This is the run of the gamut that they always do. And you put your client in a more comfortable position. And I think as an attorney point too, it helps build confidence between you and your client, because the client sees, oh, they kind of do know what they're talking about. They know exactly what this person is going to say to me. And having that knowledge with the different institutions is helpful. And then knowing this is a Disney case, we're probably going to settle it. Or knowing this is maybe this is a Walmart case and this is the defense attorney we get, oh, we're going to trial on this. It'll definitely change how you prepare the case and how you litigate the case. And that knowledge, I think, is invaluable. And having that is invaluable. So in a work comp case, you can have also what we call a third-party liability case, which would be a slip and fall premises liability. An example would be you're at the office and maybe you're walking down to your boss's office and you trip and fall maybe on rug that's bunched up, and it shouldn't be like that. You would not only have a work comp case because you were injured while you were on the job, you would also have you would have a trip and fall case because it's a third-party liability. So for those that are injured while on the job, that's always a potential that you don't just have one case, you actually have 2 cases. And they'll play a role together, but they are ultimately 2 independent cases. So contributory versus comparative, they're 2 different themes of negligence. Every state chooses which one that they're going to follow. So most states follow a comparative negligence rule. Some states still follow contributory negligence. Example, you go to a jury trial and the jury decides that the plaintiff is 50% at fault for the fall, the trip, whatever it may be, and you get $1 million verdict. all that's going to happen is that verdict is going to get reduced by 50%. So instead of $1 million, the plaintiff is going to get $500,000. As opposed to a contributory negligence state. Contributory negligence, if the plaintiff is found to have contributed to the incident or the fall or the slip, they can't collect. They can't collect anything, regardless of what the verdict may be. So it's definitely a strong advantage to be in a comparative state, and I think the trend is that most states are comparative. There's few states left that are contributory negligence states. At Morgan, we handle premises liability cases very differently. We have a dedicated premises liability department. There's over 100 attorneys in our premises department alone. That means it's 100 attorneys constantly dealing with these defense counsels, constantly dealing with these different defendants, and building that knowledge that you need to litigate a premises liability case until the end, and then being able to see it through until the end. And at Morgan & Morgan, we are endowed the opportunity, which you don't get at many law firms, to litigate a case, to try a case, to not back down. And because we're given that opportunity, we were able to resolve more than $400 million last year in premises liability cases for our clients. And we wouldn't be able to do that without the awesome team of attorneys we have and the awesome resources we have at Morgan & Morgan.